Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts, and today I'm here with Brownells Daily Defense to talk to you about marksmanship fundamentals. So really that boils down to three things: sight management, trigger management, and follow through. Now there are a lot of other subjects that we're going to talk about, but really these are the bare bones minimum that we really want to emphasize. So let's start with sight management. What does sight management mean? Well, there are three parts to sight management: the sight alignment, sight picture, and then understanding what you should be focusing on. So when it comes to sight alignment, that's really talking about aligning the front sight with the rear sight. Now, the front sight is probably the most important part of this formula. You could be looking at three things. You could be looking at the target, you could be looking at the front sight, you could be looking at the rear sight. So what you're going to want to do is fight the urge to look at the target and instead focus strictly on the front sight, and in particular the top of the front sight. So when you do that, what you're going to be doing is using this mantra: equal height, equal light. And what that means is that I need the top of the front sight to be equal with the top of the rear. Then I need the top of the front sight to be equal spaced between the rear notch. And if I can do that, I have properly aligned my sights. Once I've done that, I can then take the sight alignment and superimpose it on the target, and that creates my sight picture. Now, whatever the target might be, whether it's a bullseye, silhouette, steel, whatever the case might be, your sight alignment is going to be superimposed on whatever you intend on hitting. The last thing we talk about is when it comes to your sights, keep in mind that as you're shooting, the gun is moving. And so you're going to be constantly having to adjust your sights. So just because the sights were settled at one point doesn't mean that you stop managing those sights. You have to continually manage them to make sure that they continually stay aligned. That moves us to trigger management. And trigger management also has three things that we want to talk about. The first thing we want to talk about is going to be, if you look at a trigger is nothing more than a lever. So if you understand how levers work, there's going to be the fulcrum, and the further away from the fulcrum I am, the more mechanical leverage I'll have. So if we can, we always want to move our finger to the bottom portion of the trigger. And as long as you're not rubbing or dragging against the bottom part of the trigger guard, you should be okay. The next thing we talk about is what part of my trigger finger should I actually place on the trigger. Here, there's really three trains of thoughts: the tip, the pad, or the knuckle. I reserve the tip for really super precise type shooting with maybe a high-powered rifle. But that leaves us the pad and the knuckle. Which one should I use? I will tell you that's going to depend on your hand size and the gun size. If the grip size is so big that it's really hard for you to do that, it's going to be problematic. But what we're trying to achieve here is we're trying to put enough of our trigger finger on the trigger so that I can generate enough power to be smooth. If I lack the power, I'll make up for it with excessive force, and that excessive force is going to disrupt your sights, which means that the shot will be errant. So once I have solved that problem, the next thing I need to do is talk about the trigger's movement. How does the trigger move? Well, as I mentioned, it's going to move smoothly. But if you really dissect the trigger, you should be able to feel like three parts to that trigger's movement. The first part is going to be all that slack, the slop as we call it. The second part is going to be that the slop moves to the slack, and that's just this little bit of movement before you get to the sear wall. And then of course, once you're at the sear wall, you're going to squeeze the trigger, and that should discharge the round with minimal disruption to the sights. So when we're talking about the movement of the trigger, what we have to do is we have to move that trigger from its resting position to the point where it fires a shot with minimal disruption to the sights. And that's why power is going to be so important. Now, after we're done firing that shot, the gun is going to recoil. And as it recoils, what we want to do is we want to apply the principles of follow-through. And what follow-through means is that even though we may only fire one shot, we need to be thinking about firing multiple shots. And the reason behind that is habits. We want to create good habits that allow us to perform this almost automatically. So follow-through means that once the gun recoils, what I need to do is I need to move the gun back to the target. After I've done that, I need to look at my sights again, and then after I've done that, I need to reset the trigger, and if I need to fire, I'm ready to fire. So keep this in mind, that these three things are going to be constantly adjusting, constantly moving, constantly being, you have to constantly be managing these things. But if you can, what you're going to find is your degree of accuracy, your degree of marksmanship is going to improve over time. So I'm Jeff Gonzalez. Would love to hear any questions or comments. Please feel free to post them down below. Until then, take care and stay safe.